Fast Tackle Debriefing number 4. Our fleet had been roaming around hostile space for a little while, and we had blind warped to the outgate. We hit the dictator bubble on the edge, and I noticed a buzzer decloak next to us, and immediately began targeting him. When I see him light the covert Cyno, I double-click away in space, then activate my micro-warp drive to pull range. This ends up saving my life as the rest of the fleet gets smart-bombed at 0. In this clip, I arrive from a Titan bridge and warp over to the hostiles in a bubble. We are trying to engage a hostile Kikimora fleet. Kikimoras are the mortal enemy of interceptors. They apply damage incredibly well. I begin by maintaining long point only, flying at full velocity at longer range to avoid being killed. I see a friendly Hector bubble up, and most of the fleet is still inside the bubble, so I'm not too worried about scramming targets at the moment. I see my target trying to escape the bubble, so I get closer and scram him. Again, most of the hostile fleet is in a bubble, so I'm focusing on tackling those that are not inside bubbles currently. I see some targets are moving at full velocity, so I get closer to scram them. This target is almost on the edge of the bubble, so I get closer to go for a scram. As soon as he starts shooting me, I activate my ancillary armor repairer and begin to warp out. Some friendly Lodger ups probably saved my life. This engagement has been going on for a while. We're fighting Afterburner Gilas. I've been buzzing around and pointing claymores for a while. Both sides have been losing ships. The moment I've been waiting for has finally happened. The mass Yellowbox from the hostile drones. I have my bracket set to show all so that I can see their icons in space. This is a situation where the speed of the interceptor can really shine. As an interceptor, you are faster than the Gila drones can move. I immediately double-click away from the hostiles and also the friendly fleet. While these drones are chasing me, they cannot be shooting the friendly fleet, and I'm able to lure them quite far away, increasing the time lag between when they can begin shooting friendlies again. I could warp out here at any point, but that would immediately reset the drone aggro. You can see about half of them pulling their drones back once they realize they won't be able to catch me, but I'm still kiting out about 8 Gilas worth of drones that are very far away from any other friendly targets. I'm continuing to burn, and there's 2 more Gilas that have recalled their drones, and finally all of them are coming back, but you'll see they have to travel that long distance back to the Gila themselves and then even further back to friendlies. So with this maneuver I have negated almost all their DPS for quite a few seconds. For the rest of the fight they never mass Yellowbox me again, and I continue to fly around long pointing claymores and such. Here the hostile fleet warps away, but not the one claymore I still have long pointed. I try to target a secondary for Scram but catch some drones instead. Thankfully we have a Hick who bubbles up and catches the other Gilas that are close to the friendly fleet. I establish a close Scram on my claymore, and we clean up the rest of the targets on grid. As I am landing on the Stargate at 0, because I used my interdiction nullifier to warp when bubbles were already up, I see an Orthrus crashing back towards the gate, surrounded by friendlies at range. I immediately jump through, and notice the second Orthrus going to do the same thing. Before I've even fully loaded grid, I am spamming double-click to move my ship in space and break my gate cloak, which will allow me to immediately begin targeting the Orthrus as soon as it appears. I switch over to my Gate Camp Overview tab, which only shows hostile ships, nothing else in the list. The next thing I do is immediately overheat for extra speed from the micro-warp drive and tackle range for the point and scram. I then double-click back towards the Stargate itself to position myself towards the center of the sphere where the Orthrus could possibly spawn from. As soon as he appears, I hold Control and left-click to begin targeting, and then hold W and left click to begin orbiting at my default which is 500 meters close range. I then activate both my micro warp drive and my warp disruptor, and I'm spamming my warp scrambler on my keyboard F3 key. Because I was spamming the Scram button, I turn it off as soon as I turn it on, but I re-engage it as soon as possible. I'm late to activate my small Ansel armor repairer, but it doesn't really matter because an Orthrus is going to eat me at 0. That's fine. The point is he's scrammed very close to the Stargate, and all of my fleet members are coming in right behind me. I go down, but 1 second later, the Raptor has him scrammed, and now he's done. Other fleet members are rapidly approaching, getting secondary scrams, and a Dictor bubble, and there's Logi to provide reps. This is a perfect example of what the Interceptor and the fit that I run is designed to do, and that is to catch people with the first scram. You can see the other Orthrus, almost 200 kilometers away, still burning at full speed. Nobody was able to catch him close to the Stargate, and they're having a very hard time getting closer to him. And the whole time, he's shooting chasing frigates with his missiles. We are putting a lot of pressure on him, however, and he probably had to reload his missiles. He makes the mistake of warping to 0 at this Astrahus, and here comes Sven Van Dam in the Malediction to get tackle on him. Now that he's scrammed and the rest of the fleet is arriving shortly to get secondary tackle, the Orthrus is dead as well. Quick reactions on Sven's part, and flying an interceptor with the faster warp speed means that he was able to get to the target's location before he could warp away. And Sven even survives because he burns away. In this engagement, I am part of a smaller Brave interceptor fleet, and we are supporting the larger Goonswarm cruiser fleet against hostile cormorants, which outnumber us. The cormorants want to snipe us, and we want to catch them at 0 with tackle. I see the cormorants landing at range close to some wrecks, so I reposition myself on the grid to try and get a warp in on them. As I am aligning back toward the hostiles, I hear the FC call that they're warping in with combat probes, and when I see the purple bracket landing on top of the hostiles, I warp to the FC. I had a separate tab for command destroyers. Their FC was Zigum in the Stork, but he MJD'd away. I switched back to my main combat tab for cormorants to tackle. I warped a little too soon. The FC still hadn't landed at 0, so I'm at range from the cormorants, so I overheat my micro warp drive and burn in towards them. I can see from their blue velocity arrows they are switching their align. This is good for us, which means we have time to tackle things. I do a small controlled drag to target a group of hostiles toward the main bunch, trying to avoid targeting my friendly purples toward the middle of the screen, and I activate my heated point as soon as possible. I do a scram on a secondary target as I fly through the group and come back around on an automatic orbit. Most of the fleet begins to warp away. This is again good. The blue ruptures are in range to kill things. I activate my overheated small ancillary armor repairer and try to kite the incoming cormorant damage a little bit. Thankfully, the cormorants are either dying or warping away. Even though I burn out of tackle range, he does die to the ruptures because he was tackled before that and he wasn't able to warp away instantly. Here we have a hostile Ferox that our Dictor pilot has just barely managed to catch landing on their own Fortizar, and this is where tether mechanics come into play. If the Ferox is still aggressed from combat, or if the Ferox is targeting anything, he is unable to tether on his own Fortizar. Simply being inside a bubble does not prevent you from being tethered. I acquire a target lock and tackle the Ferox. The scram here is important. If the Ferox is de-aggressed and not targeting any other objects, he will be able to tether. However, if I am actively scramming him, he will be unable to tether. Even though I have a target lock and a long point with my warp disruptor, if the Ferox had unlocked all of his targets and was fully de-aggressed, he would have tethered there. I lose target lock because of the EC drones, but he dies shortly afterwards. I see the other targets are yellowboxing me, which means they have broken their own tether. One of them has redboxed me, which means he has aggression. It's an opportunity to tackle. As I get closer, the PDS of the Fortizar goes off. It's not enough to kill me instantly in a frigate. If you immediately warp away after receiving the first burst of damage, you will survive in a frigate. Here we have a Retribution landing next to me at 0 on a Stargate. My friendly fleet is waiting on the other side. The first thing I do is begin orbiting the Stargate at 500 meters, so that I can avoid a perfect shot if he aggresses me at 0. I can still follow him through the Stargate if he jumps, because I am within the 2,500 meter activation radius. I see the yellow box, but still no velocity, so I target him back. I see the Retribution pulling away from the gate at high velocity but not warping, so I quickly pre-overheat my modules and follow after him. I am able to immediately point him with my overheated long point and chase him down to Scram. He's shooting me and lands a solid hit as I'm approaching him directly, so I activate my heated ancillary armor repairer and manually pilot away after getting the initial Scram. I kite out to further range to repair armor. My fleetmate has him scrammed. I come back in a little bit closer and maintain longer distance for a long point, secondary. If the Retribution had begun aligning to another celestial object without microwarp driving away from the Stargate, he very likely would have been about to warp. If I had aggressed him at that point, he would have been able to immediately turn around and activate the Stargate because he wasn't aggressed. Here we have a Lowsec Brawl. I am sitting at a tactical observing the fight unfold. When I see wrecks appear near hostile fleets, I am saving their location. Our purple fleet is currently trying to engage the orange fleet, and the white neutral fleet is assisting us. I see the hostiles beginning to warp away, so I warp into a nearby wreck and try to get tackle on any stragglers. I accidentally drop a long point on my first target and he warps away. Another hostile DPS ship has landed, and I focus him as the next secondary tackle for my long point. As the hostile fleet arrives on top of our fleet at 0, I bail out as a tackle. There's really nothing I can do there. This is Lowsec, so there are no bubbles. However, command destroyer Booshers can still be used to great effect. While on my tab for command destroyers, I noticed a pair of hostile Bifrosts lining up for a spearfish attempt on what I figured out to be the blue-friendly fleet based on distances. Because the Boosh is 100 kilometers exactly, I figured out their target and positioned myself where they would be. One of the benefits of being fast tackle in tie-dye is that it enhances your reactions. You're able to see things happening in slow motion and react to them with equivalent superhuman speed. I estimate my own velocity and the timing of their boosh and the distances perfectly, and they properly offset their booshes by only a second or two, so I am unable to scram the target before the second boosh goes off, but I am able to tackle both of them after the end of their boosh. I hold tackle and they eventually die. Watching for hostile command destroyers going for boosh attempts is an important part of flying defensively as a fast tackle with your Scram. Having a separate overview that you can quickly filter for command destroyers that are hostile is very useful. Having my tactical overlay turned on helped tremendously with gauging the distances involved. In this clip, the friendlies are trying to extract through the EFM Stargate. I know that hostile stealth bombers like to run bombing runs on these escape attempts, so I am sitting off the Stargate, waiting for them to appear nearby. As an interceptor, I can outrun the bombs before they reach their target, and position myself to catch them with my long point. I notice the wing of stealth bombers decloaking next to me, so I pan my camera in order to do a controlled drag left click to target lots of them at once. I activate my long point on the first target that I acquire, and then quickly left click on the second target that I acquire in the hopes of performing a scram on it if I get close enough. The rest of the bombers warp away, and I stop overheating my long point, and he dies. Another bomber decloaks, this time just by himself. I burn for him, prop mod on, heated long point, and I actually land the long point, but he must have had a warp core stabilizer activated and he warps away. I dodge the bomb by immediately flying towards where the stealth bomber is, and the bomb is focused on the Stargate itself. Bombs will travel 30 kilometers from the stealth bomber that launches them and explode in a 15-kilometer radius. The second purifier, this is one I catch, he doesn't have a warp core stabilizer and he dies. Because I am in a nullified interceptor, and there are no hostile fleets currently on the gate next to us, I'm fine to sit here and tackle stealth bombers and get aggression, while the rest of our friendlies jump through the Stargate to safety. Here we have a fun engagement where a neutral Zernitra is sitting inside bubbles, tanking our entire Harpy fleet plus blues. A neutral fleet arrives to the party. The first thing I do is pull range away from the hostile fleet in order to avoid being called as a primary. Then I take my drugs. Most of the hostile fleet is inside bubbles and burning closer, so there's no point in me tackling them. I am maintaining far range. I see those Hugins. Those are very dangerous if they web me and the hostile fleet decides to shoot me. I swing back through inside the bubbles in order to do a drive-by scram on the primary DPS target who is moving away from the main fleet. The Zernitra is smart bombing, so I am manually piloting to make sure I avoid getting hit by them, and I see some hostile ships begin to smart bomb as well. I am maintaining closer range tackle on the Cenotaph because it's the primary DPS of the main fleet at the moment. I see a couple other purple triangles close to the Cenotaph, so I'm not worried about holding him down. Appears to be afterburner fit anyway. I swing out wide again outside the bubble looking for targets that are trying to get away, or in this case a Bifrost landing at the edge of the bubbles. I do a drive-by scram. I come back and do another drive-by scram. Now that I see him moving inside the bubbles, I switch to the Vindicator, which has been called primary by the main fleet for DPS. That's a battleship. There's a chance he might try to boosh away with his MJD, so I get in closer for a drive-by scram. I still have my Bifrost locked, and now that he's trying to fly away from the bubbles, I turn back around and maintain tackle on him. He started taking damage from somebody, probably the blues, so I hold tackle and I kill him. Again, I'm looking for targets on the edge of the bubbles trying to get away, or separated from the main fleet, while avoiding getting called primary and being too close to the smart bombs going off in the center of the grid. This does put me outside friendly frigate Logi range, so I'm on my own, like usual, as an interceptor. Capacitor is often a problem for an interceptor, so I activate my small Nosferatu whenever I get a chance when I'm close enough to a target. I wasn't planning on sticking around next to the Scimitar, but he gets called primary by the FC because he's likely separated noticeably elsewhere, away from the main fleet on the grid, so I swing back around for extra tackle. I'm constantly pre-overheating my point and scram for extra range on the initial activation. I see a Hugin outside the bubbles, away from the main fleet, an excellent tackle opportunity, but a risk because if he webs me, I can easily be killed. But that would mean he's not webbing the hostile fleet primary. So even if you're getting shot at or webbed as a scepter, if there's a main flight going on, anything directed at you is not being directed at the friendly fleet. Hugins are valuable targets, so somebody has decided to shoot him and he dies. I go after another Hugin on the edge of the bubbles for the same reasons. Because I was on a close automatic orbit, I end up flying through the ball of hostiles, and they have their smart bombs running, so I take some shield damage, so I pull further range to avoid that. I lose tackle on the Hugin, but I'm not too worried because he's deep inside bubbles. I see a Tengu on the edge of the bubbles, so I decide to make him my tackle target. Again, because he's separated from the main neutral fleet, he's more likely to be called as primary by friendlies and to be out of range of friendly reps for him. I see a couple of purple triangles next to him, so I'm not worried about holding tackle anymore. The Harpies are much better at holding tackle because they are tankier than an interceptor. But this neutral fleet is afterburner fit, so the Scrams aren't having much effect on reducing their velocity. So I decided to stick around because he was escaping from the bubbles. I notice a group of neutrals moving with high velocity away from the fight, and I immediately turn around and head towards them. I can tell by the length of their blue velocity arrows because of my tactical overlay. Claymores are Link's command ships. They're valuable targets, so I primary that one for tackle. I deactivate my long point after acquiring close orbit with the Scram on my primary tackle target in order to hold down a second target and prevent him from warping away. I get neutered out, so my capacitor is 0, but my small Nosferatu keeps my Scram running at the very minimum. I get scrammed by the target I'm tackling, the Claymore, but thankfully he dies a few seconds later. I'm still out of capacitor and unable to run my own small anti-armor repair or any tackle modules, and one of the hostile ships gets away. I realize I have to manage my capacitor very carefully here, so I deactivate my long point because I see several other friendlies on top of him, overheat my micro warp drive in order to get close enough to then activate my Nosferatu module. Now that I am within NOS range of the target, I can maintain the micro warp drive orbit against a very fast afterburning ship. Now that I have more capacitor, I can fix my armor with my local reps. One of the nearby blues even shield reps me. Thanks for that. Once the blue fleet reloads their missiles, they kill the primary target. I see another target on the edge of bubbles far away from the main blob in the center next to the Dread. I turn around and fly towards him. There are no purple ships next to him, so I have to micro warp drive over there. Just because he's inside a bubble currently and there are blue triangles around him doesn't mean he's guaranteed to be tackled the entire time. Nothing else I can do on this grid. The other neutral has several purple triangles, so they probably tackle pretty well. Always worth going for secondary tackle or even tertiary or quadruple in these situations. In hindsight, it's also useful being a purple triangle next to this ship that the FC would have the ability to warp to if there were no bubbles all over the grid. The blue fleet Booshers next to him, and he dies shortly afterwards.